Congratulations, Betty and Karen. I know I speak for everyone in the room, especially all of us educators, when I say that we aspire to be just like you. Thank you. Six months ago, I took an inventory for a Strengths Finder test, I believe it was called. And one of the questions asked you to list 6 men and 6 women who have been impactful in your life. And it occurred to me when I was up here earlier, as I looked across the room, that 5 of the 6 men that I wrote down are in this room tonight. My dad is in Dallas, Texas, but my husband is here, Clark Baker is here, Bill Pereira is here, Hans Broekman is here, and Faustin Weber is here. So without further ado, I would like to turn the floor over to first Faustin Weber, and then Hans Broekman, our most recent past head of school, and our founding head of school, who have some words to share with all of you. Thank you. And while Faustin's approaching, we're so pleased you're playing in and you were able to get here in the nick of time. Faustin is, as I said earlier, the head of a school in Fairhope, and he had a very important program for his own school today and has a very important program for his own school tomorrow. So they have zipped in and they're zipping out of town. But Diane, we're so happy to have you here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. What an honor to be back and to see so many people that I've just grown close to over the years and reminded of what a wonderful community this is. I'm really honored to speak tonight about my time as headmaster with Karen and Betty, but also my time. Diane and I had 2 sons that graduated from John Paul II, and I want to tell you a little bit about things from a parent point of view, because they had great impact on our children. And then I'll tell you 2 things from a headmaster point of view. So my son Aaron was a rising junior when we sat down with him and told him that we would be moving from Montgomery, Alabama to Nashville, Tennessee. And he was most unhappy with his father. He was very comfortable at Montgomery Catholic. He had been there since his kindergarten years. He had good friends. He was on the football team. He was in youth and government. He was cruising academically without having to work too hard. And we just rocked his world. But over time, he got used to the idea until in May, we sat down with Aaron and said, well, Aaron, you have to write an essay to come to John Paul II. And that put him in a foul mood. What's the essay? Why you want to be a student at John Paul II High School? He said, I don't. So nevertheless, go upstairs and write that essay. So about 15 minutes, he comes downstairs sulking, and his topic sentence for the essay is, I would rather digest pine cones than come to John Paul II High School. Now, his mother looked at him angrily. She looked at me. I said, they're probably going to take him. And she said, I don't care. That's not the way I want my son to be represented. It's for you to go right upstairs and write that essay again. So he goes sulking up the stairs. Comes down about 10 minutes later, and it's all over the top. The reason I want to come to John Paul II is it's the best Catholic high school in the Southeast. On and on, blah, 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 blah. I look at my wife, she looks at me. I said, you're probably going to take him. And they did. And I remember meeting Pat Weaver shortly. I said, what kind of a terrible essay question is that? And Pat told me, he said, I would much rather read the first essay than the second. But I tell you all that to say it was not easy for our son to come to John Paul II. Although he's very outward, he's a professional stand-up comedian now. Although he's very outward, we watched our son kind of close in on himself when he came here. What's the worst time of day in a school day for a transfer kid? Lunchtime, absolutely. Because you don't want to sit by yourself like some sort of loser, but you don't want to presume that you can sit with these guys that may or may not want you to sit with them. So Aaron's defense was he would go to the library for lunch every day, and he wouldn't eat anything. And we watched this go on for weeks. This was not our son. We were worried about it. Now during that time, I got to know Karen a little bit. Karen asked questions. Tell me about Aaron. What does he do? Well, he played football. He was in youth and government. I could see her eyes light up, and I said, youth and government. Just kind of went on. But one day Aaron comes home, and he says, well, Mrs. Phillips met with me, and she wanted me to join the youth and government team. And then she said, and in fact, we need somebody to represent John Paul II as the youth governor candidate for the state of Tennessee. We're kind of stunned. Aaron said yes. And so he went to this youth He went to the conference. and he was elected the youth governor. And the point of that story is not about Aaron. It was as soon as he started getting active again in youth and government under Karen's leadership, we saw almost instantly our son come back to himself. And Diane and I are so grateful to Karen for what she did for Aaron. And it was the same thing that Karen's been doing to so many other students all throughout the course of her career. Betty was involved in that first year too with our son. Aaron did not have Betty for pre-calculus, honors pre-calculus. That didn't matter because Betty ran the department. And if there was any problems in the department, Betty was going to be the lead in solving that problem. There was a problem in the department that year. The headmaster's son was not doing very well in math. And so Betty asked if she could see me just before first quarter grades came out. I said, sure. So we came to our office, and I sat on one couch, and she sat on the other. And you can almost hear Betty saying this, well, Mr. Weber, we really like Aaron. He's just a wonderful young man, and we just know that we're going to get him through this math program. He's going to have a lot of success. But he's having a teensy problem adjusting to math right now in pre-calculus. And Mr. Weber, he's going to be making a D for the first quarter. Now, I instinctively stood up, and I started walking to her, which I think in retrospect might have been kind of a threatening motion. But it was an honest motion, because I went up to her, and I shook her hand. I said, Betty, this is exactly what our son needs. And it really was. I told you he was cruising, right, at the school that we came from. He could not cruise here at John Paul II. And he certainly couldn't cruise in mathematics. And in his senior year, he did have Betty for honors calculus, AP calculus. And we would watch our son at 6:30 in the morning leave to go get tutoring from Betty at 7 a.m. And Diane and I would look at each other and we'd say, is this our son? You know, and then we'd high-five each other. And we'd sing Betty's praises. And I really believe that Betty and the math department, JPII in general, especially the math department, kicked Aaron's rear end a little bit and made him a really much better student. It was only for that reason he was able to get into Notre Dame after he graduated. It's because of what JPII did for him. So we're grateful to these ladies, first of all, as parents. Now I want to tell you a little bit about Betty that kind of struck me when I first came here as headmaster. So Karen did something as dean of students which was unusual to me. She allowed the department chairs to schedule everybody in the math department. She allowed the department chairs to decide who taught what. And I noticed that Betty was teaching 4 of the lowest level Algebra 1 classes that she had chosen to teach. And this really struck me because those of you, I think all of us might understand this, right? It's harder to teach those kids because they doubt themselves. There's not that motor going on. When you teach honors kids, they have this motor, and you got to direct them a little bit. You got to kind of keep them honest from time to time. But basically, they're self-directed. Just steer them in the right direction. It takes much more work to teach the kids who don't believe they have the capacity to do the math. Plus, JP2 brought kids from 20 different schools into our 9th grade. So they were at all different levels. So I said, Betty, tell me why you choose to teach the low-level Algebra 1 students. And she looked at me and she said, because I can have the most impact on those kids. If I can teach them to be confident in themselves, confident in the math, then I can make an eternal difference to them. And I want to say this to you in the highest possible compliment. Now that is the teacher. That's a teacher who understands her vocation, her ministry. It's not about the math. That's not the true subject of what she teaches. It's the kids themselves. And that has marked Betty throughout her career. And that's why she's been such a special teacher, such a special presence for John Paul II. When I came to JP2, succeeding Hans, I met with the Board of Trustees for the first time, and I wanted to kind of give them a sense that Bill Wood had me come back 4 or 5 times before they hired me, and I'd gotten to know the school pretty well. And I wanted to give the Board of Trustees a sense of what I thought of the school as an outsider coming in, but one who had given his life to Catholic education. And I remember saying that when I looked under the hood of the JP2 engine, what I saw was a Ferrari. A high-performance Ferrari. And if that is the right metaphor, then I would tell you that Karen has been the carburetor of this high-performance engine for 20 years. You may remember that a carburetor's job is to take the high-octane fuel and mix it with the right amount of air so that it becomes combustible. Too much air, the engine doesn't run. Too little air, the engine doesn't run. So Karen took these magnificent teachers, these magnificent aspirational goals of the school. One parent said there's an optimism for excellence at JP2. I thought, man, that's like the best compliment I've ever heard about a school. But she took all of that, and then through her presence, her faith, her kindness, her generosity of spirit, really made this place special. And, you know, when I think about JP2 looking back, I've been away now for 7 years. It isn't the programs, it's not the AP scores, which have always been magnificent. The DNA of JP2 is the Mike McLarens, the Jennifer Dyes, and tonight, in a special way, the Betty Mayberrys and the Karen Phillipses. What a gift these ladies have been to this community. I'm proud here to be with you. I want to say one thing, because Hans is following me, so I'm going to get in this shot here on Hans. So there's this traditional moment when the outgoing headmaster goes and meets privately with the incoming headmaster. There's a certain curiosity about that from the outside looking in. You know, the mythology that maybe there's some sort of special hermeneutical key that the outgoing guy, the wisdom he can give to the incoming headmaster. I remember Hans telling me this. Hans, you can deny it if you'd like when you get up here. He says, yeah, I just do whatever Karen and Betty tell me to. he said, I don't want to make Betty mad. She scares me. God bless you.
Cannot deny. I worried about this on the plane. I worried there would be many people here. I worried that I would become very emotional, and I was right to worry. It reminds me of a story that a priest told me about a trip he had to make with his bishop to a very large prison. and they were addressing the inmates. And there was a certain amount of hesitation, because although the shepherd loves his flock, he had not often spoken to the inmates together at the prison. And he said, no, this is going to be tricky, because how should I address these men? Brothers in Christ. Well, you could do that, said the priest, but remember, they are all murderers, and the press will be there. And not everybody has quite the Catholic, small c imagination to understand what you're doing there. Friends? Well, are they your friends, Bishop? They're not really your friends. They're murderers. And this priest told me that the bishop confidently strode before the audience of inmates and said, gentlemen, it's so good to see so many of you here. It is a pleasure, and it's an honor to be here. And it's I have to admit, it's very overwhelming. So I'm a little nervous. I don't have very many remarks, but I'm nervous about them, because for me it's highly emotional to be here and to see all of you who mean so much to me, to my family. Kierkegaard, that's the Danish thinker you all read every evening, commented that life can only be understood backwards. And I understand that. I understand that here. I understand now what in my youth I failed to understand. The awesome responsibility, the awesome gift, the awesome opportunity, the amazing grace that all of us in this room were and are given through the Holy Spirit to found, to develop, to advance, to live Pope John Paul II High School. And briefly, about Karen, they say an icon is something through which you perceive something infinite. And I remember standing in 12 Stones car parking lot, I think it's in America. And Karen had been at the board meeting. I had just met her, really. We'd been to a couple of meetings, party at the Bakers. And she stood next to her car, and a feeling overwhelmed me. I'm going to say it was attraction. I mean that in every sense of the word. I'm a happily married man, I can say this. This was a beautiful person who was wise and shrewd, cultured, graceful. So, I sort of asked her out on a big date. And what I realize now is how lucky I was. It's just luck. Because through this thing that I encountered came all these wonderful people. Richard, Betty, Jennifer, lots and lots of kids. And all of a sudden, this school existed. Karen's yes created Pope John Paul II High School. There's no doubt about that. Now, as far as Betty is concerned, my memories of her job interview are slightly different. We were in the trailer. Joy Montegani was filing her nails and already planning how to beat Father Ryan. And Matthew Seiler, who couldn't be here tonight, unfortunately, was in his back office, and the brief was very simple. Betty will not be coming to work at our school, but let's get her in there. Let's pick her brain. Let's make sure we find out everything about how she would start this. I have no recollection of speaking about the vision for Pope John Paul II High School. I am a garrulous, rather verbose person, and I was silent for about, I think it was an hour. Because it's probably the longest time I've been silent in my life. And at the end of that hour, Betty left. No commitment was made. At the beginning, I thought, I've got to take notes here because this woman is talking 100 miles an hour. And I'm rubbish at math and don't understand anything she's really saying, but I can scribble it down. Maybe Karen can do something with it. And she left the trailer. And I sat at the table where we had met at. And Matt Seiler came out of his office and he gave me a high five. And we looked at each other and said, got another good one. And that's what really happened. Now, we've been doing high fives ever since, and as you can tell, in Betty, we found somebody extraordinary. Now, for me, this evening is also difficult because one of the musketeers is missing. He's our friend, he's my friend, and he's my comrade. He's a man I've been in the wars with. I met Mike McLaren when I was 18 years old. In fact, I wasn't 18, I was 17. I was about to turn 18, and my school, in a rather quirky English Benedictine way, allowed me, before going to the University of St. Andrews, to coach the soccer team. I'd been a reasonable player, so they said, come back, coach. And also do some teaching before you go, because University in Scotland didn't start until October. And I got on the field, and previously in my classics classes, I had learned that the Greeks viewed a god as someone who was slightly bigger, slightly better, slightly more than anybody else. And I saw this man, and I wasn't sure. We walked off the field, and it's a poignant memory for me now because I was a boy. Mike's about 7 or 8 years older. He was a young man. And being Mike, he told me his whole life story between halfway and the goal. I never met anybody like this. And he said, I've met this woman, Jody, and I kind of don't know what to do, but you think I should marry her? Which is an extraordinary question to ask a 17-year-old. I wanted to send for a priest or something. There were many there, and I thought maybe this man needs a chat. But I said, if you love her and you want to, why not? And I'd like to believe I contributed meaningfully to their marriage. And I then went to university, and I taught in the UK. And you can imagine his surprise when about 8 years after he met me, I was his boss. And I was in charge. I was in charge of Mike. And there are too many amazing tales about this man. What I can tell you is that subsequently I asked Jody and Mike to move from Washington, D.C. with Matthew and his family ultimately, but first to northwest Arkansas, to a town called Subiaco, population 508, when the school is in session. And you can just imagine how Mike went down there. These people, like, if an alien had landed, I tried to blend in. Mike had his motorbike. He finally got to shoot all the guns that he hadn't been able to fire since his time in the RAF. And then when JP2 came along, I said, look, you gotta come. And they did. Anybody who was there at the beginning and who knew this man knows that there literally will never, ever be another Mike McLaren. If a true educator is an incarnated sign of what a human person can be and what life can mean, this man was it. And, it was my privilege to watch him. Because controlling Mike was a big problem. He had opinions on everything. He certainly had opinions on how teaching should be done. He regularly gave people opinions about who they should marry, which house they should buy. And this is so intense that a couple of months ago in the UK, we were trying to buy a car, and my wife Eleanor turned to me and said, I wish we could call Mike, because he would tell us what car to buy. He was a force of nature, a friend, a genuinely good man. I don't remember Mike speaking ill of people or gossiping. He could raise his voice, many pupils can attest. But I think he loved them dearly. They were all his children. And it's impossible to conceive of JP2 as it is today, or when we founded it, without his influence, without his presence. And when I'm there, I feel his presence. And I know you do too. I know we miss him together. And we will meet him again. We'll hear him at the gates, I think. And whereas my beatific vision does not include teaching European history to people, he will be there doing it when we get there. His widow, Jody, who's with us, has been extraordinarily generous. She made the initial gift to the Mike McLaren Financial Aid Fund. And these cards are in front of you. Now, what is this fund about? This fund is about making sure that any child, regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of their family's circumstances, has an opportunity to come to JP2. And here we are. I mean, we've just shared something that means so much to us, so much to our children, so much to our families. So I would ask you to prayerfully consider supporting this fund, supporting what Jody has started for JP2. Let's keep JP2 accessible to all. Let's share the gift that we were given. I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve you. I didn't deserve JP2. It's just pure grace. And let's let that reality inspire us to share this with children who could not otherwise come to the school.